All right, hello and welcome. Today we're diving into something pretty wild. It's a document called the Scientific Indictment. And trust me, this thing is a rabbit hole. It all kicks off with this one single, completely inexplicable event. And from there, it just spirals out into a story that, well, it could literally challenge the very fabric of our reality. So let's get into it.
So, what if a UFO sighting wasn't just some weird light in the sky? What if it was the first clue in a detective story? A story about the nature of reality itself? That's exactly how this source material frames its argument. It's set up like an investigation. It takes this one mysterious craft, the so-called TR-3B, and uses it as the one loose thread to start unraveling a much larger and way more complex story. So let's start where the document starts, with the inciting incident. We're heading to a military base in Florida for what the source simply calls the anomaly. Our story kicks off at an active military installation, Hurlburt Field, Florida, late 2017. And you'll notice the document is super specific about the time and place. It's treating this not like some vague sighting, but like the actual scene of a crime. Now, the source immediately zooms in on the witness, Kyle P. Kopp, a Space Force electronics mechanic, and it goes to great lengths to establish his credibility, really hammering home his expertise on advanced aircraft. The point they're making is crystal clear. This wasn't just some random person looking up. This was a trained technical observer, a human sensor, if you will. So the big question is, what did this expert actually see? According to the document, this was way more than a sighting. It was like getting a technical briefing from an impossible machine. He describes a massive equilateral triangle, completely, utterly silent. No engines, no rotors, no conventional propulsion at all. Instead, it seemed to be using some kind of plasma-based gravity-distorting system. And then, poof, it just vanished, instantly. This wasn't just a UFO, it was a physics problem, hovering in midair. And that observation leads us right into the next phase of this investigation. I mean, if the craft was real, then the physics to explain it must be real too, right? So let's look at the source's theory on how these impossible craft could actually work. The search for an explanation, according to the document, quickly leads to one name, Dr. Salvatore Pais. He's a U.S. Navy aerospace engineer. And get this, between 2016 and 2019, Dr. Pais was granted a whole series of patents for technology that honestly sounds like it's straight out of science fiction, except it just so happens to perfectly match the description of the craft over Hurlburt Field. At the very heart of these patents is a concept Pais himself calls the Pais Effect. Now, the theory, as the source explains it, is pretty mind-bending. It involves using incredibly intense electromagnetic fields to basically mess with the quantum vacuum, the energy of empty space itself, to, and I'm quoting here, engineer the fabric of reality. Yeah. And this is just a brilliant illustration of how all these different patents supposedly fit together like a puzzle. According to the document, you start with an insane power source, a compact fusion device. Then you move that power without any loss using a room temperature superconductor. You then use all that energy to power the main device, which actually reduces the craft's inertial mass. And what's the result? A vehicle that can perform the silent, instantaneous movements that Nolap witnessed. It's a complete system.
Okay, so you'd think the patent office would just laugh this stuff out of the room, right? And they kind of did at first. They rejected the core patent, basically saying it was scientifically impossible. But then, and this is a huge moment in the document, the Navy's chief technology officer, a guy named Dr. James Sheehy, steps in. He submits a sworn declaration on the record stating that not only is this tech possible, he says it is operable and that the U.S. is already at the state of the art. I mean, wow, that is an absolutely stunning claim. This leads us right to the dramatic core of the whole story, a physicist's shocking admission. This is where the narrative gets personal, because the observer, the witness, makes direct contact with the inventor. The source then lays out a timeline of an email exchange between Kyle Knopp and Dr. Pais, and it's a wild ride. It starts with a professional inquiry, but then it quickly moves to validation, then this really strange concession, and it all ends with an abrupt order to go silent. In his very first reply, Dr. Pais addresses Knopp as my USSF brother. Now, the source argues this isn't just a friendly hello. They see it as a kind of coded recognition, like between two insiders. He then sends over papers that he himself calls a revolution in physics, immediately taking this conversation to a whole new level. So then Knopp sends over his detailed witness statement, and Pais replies with this. The document calls this, quote, the first pillar of the indictment. Just think about it. The very man who designed the theoretical craft is now on record, in writing, saying that an eyewitness account of his invention in action is not crazy at all.
The back and forth continues, and after Knopp sends over even more of his own analysis, Pais sends this just startling message. The document interprets this as a total intellectual surrender, that Knopp's understanding was so on the money that Pais felt he had no choice but to concede and just go silent.
And then, slam, the wall comes down. In his final email, Dr. Pais basically says he's been gagged. The source presents this as the system reasserting control. It's proof, they argue, that the conversation was shut down precisely because it was getting way too close to something very real and very, very classified.
So how does the source document wrap all of this up? How does it frame this whole sequence of events? Well, it calls it the cornerstone of an indictment. The argument is that this email chain provides perfect, self-contained forensic proof of a cover-up. It's a neat little package. You have the event from a credible military witness. You have the science from the actual inventor. You have the validation, where that same inventor confirms the event is real. And then you have the suppression, an official military command to stop talking.
But the story of the TR-3B, this whole amazing sequence, it isn't the final chapter. No, according to the source, it's just the prologue. This entire chain of events, the sighting, the science, the admission, the suppression, is all presented as the verifiable cornerstone for a much grander and, frankly, much stranger theory. And this is that central thesis, the Gnostic War. The document posits that there's the silent, ancient conflict being fought for control of our consciousness by what it calls a non-human parasitic intelligence. From this perspective, technologies like the TR-3B aren't just advanced aircraft, they're modern evidence of this ancient, hidden struggle. So where does that leave us? We're left with a question posed by the document itself. Is this a genuine trail of breadcrumbs, leading from a real-world event straight to a suppressed reality? Or is it something else entirely? A fabricated narrative? The indictment has been filed, the evidence has been presented. But according to the source, the final verdict, well, that's up to you.